Good morning, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann, and today I'm finally doing my October wrap-up, halfway into November. So let's dive into it. I read 9 books in the month of October, and I only actually have one hard copy, because a lot of them were library books. Oh, wait, that's not true. Pause. Unpause. I have 2 physical copies. How could I forget the one with the very yummy cover? Yeah, so a lot of library books that I've already returned and some Kindle books. So the first thing that I finished in the month of October was Square Haunting by Francesca Wade, which I did a standalone review of. I will link it down below. That was a book that I read with Margaret Pinard as part of her Patreon book club. So I will link to her Patreon as well. We'll be doing our next book in December, so it's not too late to get in on that if you want to read a book with her. And Square Haunting was wonderful nonfiction. It was sort of a collection of mini biographies of 5 female writers in between World War I and World War II. And these 5 female writers were linked by having spent some amount of time living in one particular neighborhood in London, Mecklenburgh Square, which at that time was sort of a bohemian haven of like rooming houses and flats, and was very important in the personal and literary development of all of those women, because it represented a break from Victorian ideals that they had all been raised with, where the woman was very subordinate to the men, women couldn't be independent and live their own lives, and then living in this wonderful space where it was just totally normal for them all to have independent, their own independent means, their own independent incomes, and their own independent spaces. So one theme woven throughout the book is Virginia Woolf's essay, A Room of One's Own. Virginia Woolf is the last of the 5 authors discussed, because she lived in Mecklenburgh Square at the end of her life, prior to and during World War II. So I just thought that was absolutely fantastic. So you can go watch my review below. Then the next books I finished were volumes 1 through 3 of Fullmetal Alchemist, which is a manga and also anime series by Hiromu Arakawa, or the manga is by Hiromu Arakawa. And I had watched the anime in high school and remembered really, really liking it. And so I've always wanted to go back and read the manga. And so I picked it up at the library sort of randomly while I was browsing, and read volumes 1 through 3, and I think I am going to continue with the series. I really enjoyed the manga. It's definitely more young adult, but it's very well done. And so we follow 2 kids, they're teenagers, who are real prodigy alchemists. One of them has achieved sort of like the military grade state level certification and sort of works for the military in the fictional country that the books are set in. And then he has a younger brother who is also a good alchemist. And they are on a quest because they sort of ruined their lives by trying to bring their mother back from the dead using alchemy. And of course that can't be done. And so as sort of a penalty, one of the younger brother lost his body, but the older brother was able to chain his soul inside a suit of armor, which was the only thing that was nearby that was like sort of a human-ish shaped vessel. And the older brother paid, it was either his leg or his arm, to make that happen. And then he was also injured in this like magical event gone wrong. So they're trying to put things right. They are on a quest trying to essentially get their bodies back, especially the body of the younger brother, and all kinds of shenanigans ensue along the way. They're good guys. They help a lot of people. And in volumes 1 through 3, there are some sort of mysterious big baddies that we've seen a couple times, that the boys have tangled with a little bit. And I don't really know much about the big baddies at this point in the story, so I'm excited to continue on and see what happens with those. Okay, then I finished Dragons of Spring Dawning, which is the 3rd book in the original Dragonlance Chronicles series by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. That was definitely a reread for me. Those are favorites from way back in childhood. And of course, like childhood favorites, they haven't necessarily aged super well, but it was still absolutely lovely to reread that series. It's always going to be a favorite of mine. And I reread that as part of a group, sort of a loose group all over BookTube. But the particular group I read that book with, we did a live show discussing the book, hosted over on Andrew's channel at Andrew's Wizardly Reads. So I'm not going to say too much more about that book because it's very classic fantasy. So if you're interested in it, you've probably already read it or are planning to. And then in that case, I don't want to give spoilers. But you can go check out the live show discussion on Andrew's channel. And John from Hey Y'all Listen Up was involved in that, as well as Pete from Ponderings of Pete, Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and Nico from Nico's Book Reviews. I think I just remembered everyone. Okay. And then the next book I read was a buddy read with David Wiley, so I will link to his channel down below. This is A Hobbit, a Wardrobe, and a Great War by Joseph Loconte, or Loconte. And we were trying to read this over the summer. David read it really, really quickly, and I languished because summer is very busy for me at work, and then we moved. But so I finally finished it. And this was fine. I definitely expected to learn more about Tolkien and Lewis. I should obviously it's about J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and their respective most famous works, the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Chronicles of Narnia series. And this book is about specifically how Tolkien's and Lewis's experiences in World War I in the frontline trenches shaped their books, but more importantly, because definitely Tolkien, and I can't remember Lewis, but Tolkien has always said very strongly, like, no, my book is not an allegory for the world wars. But of course it shaped who he was. And in particular, this author really argues that the experience in the trenches of World War I really, really shaped Tolkien's and Lewis's Christian faith. And then talks about how that plays out in the books. And the distinction that he's drawing is between a lot of other literature of the time in the first half of the 20th century, how a lot of it was very bleak, how a lot of people in sort of the younger generations really lost any sense of faith or sense of goodness and humanity. And Tolkien and Lewis didn't lose that, and instead sort of, forged it into, their own brand of Christianity, and how that permeates both of their works. So it was interesting, but yeah, again, like I didn't really feel like I learned much. It was sort of like, yeah, of course, I've read them. I can see that influence. So it was a very quick read. It was well written and it was well organized. The other thing, one critique David Wiley had, which I do agree, is that the first couple of chapters are really sort of a quick synopsis of World War I history almost, and like what Tolkien and Lewis did in the conflict. And it takes the author sort of a while to really get into making his main argument. So I think David and I both agreed that felt a little slow. And that's also part of why I'm like, I didn't learn much from this book, because half of it was sort of just summarizing Great World War I before the author even really dug into his arguments. So if you're really into Tolkien and Lewis, I am really into Tolkien in particular, definitely worth a read. I'm definitely going to hold on to it as sort of part of my collection of Tolkien-related works that I'm slowly building, but not quite a 5-star read for me. Okay, and then the next book that I finished in October was Haven by Rebekah Weatherspoon. This is the first book in a trilogy called Beards and Bondage. Sort of gives away what these books are about. And I'm going to go ahead and lump it in with the second book that I finished in November, which is Sanctuary. And then I will read the third book, Haven, probably later this month or in December. I'd like to just complete this series, and then I will probably just pass it on through a little free library. So these books are, they're definitely enjoyable. They open with a bang. So in the first two, and I'm assuming this will hold in the third series, within the first few pages, something awful and stressful happens to the heroines. These are all heterosexual relationships in these books. And the heroines are sort of they're in fear of their lives as a result of these events, and they need to escape for a bit and sort of go into hiding. And so in various ways, the male protagonists in these books are people who sort of already are like kind of in hiding and like withdrawn from the world. And so I don't know all the terms for romances, but it's one of those romances where two people are sort of like stuck in an isolated situation and then romance blossoms. And in both of these books so far, the romance is really cute. I really like the main characters. So in both, we have sort of a very super high powered, professionally like sassy Black woman, who thinks she's got her life together, and then all hell breaks loose, and she needs somewhere safe to go. And the male protagonists are sort of like these quiet, protective types, who are, I don't know, they're a little frustrating sometimes, in my opinion. But anyway, it was fun to read the interpersonal interactions between the female and male leads in both of these first two books, and so I'm expecting more of the same in the third book. It's Rebekah Weatherspoon. She does fantastic sex scenes. She does safe sex in all of her sex scenes. Lots of consent, lots of communication. These are not really the sort of books where breakdowns in communication is what moves the plot forward. There are definitely breakdowns in communication because, hello, we have two people trying to cohabitate and fall in love with each other. But they work their way through it. So I really like that sort of difference from that trope in contemporary romance. That said, I think the writing, these are earlier Rebekah Weatherspoon books, and I think the writing in some of her newer books has definitely improved a bit. There are some editing issues in these books, which is a little silly to like ding a book on, but like it draws you out of the story, which is not really what you want in a romance. So these were great. These were middle of the road romances for me, but definitely would highly recommend. Nothing problematic in these. And I'll continue on with the third one. Okay. Then I read or finished A Hank of Hair by Charlotte J., which is a novella, and I did a standalone review of that, which I will link down below. And this is a, I think I kept calling it a psycho thriller. So you're in the mind of one person for the entire novella, and you're sort of following an obsession that he develops with a hank of hair that he finds in his hotel room. And it's a little bit creepy, but like very much in a 1960s, 1970s way. But it's just a cool deep dive into the psyche of one person. So I really enjoyed it. And then finally, the last book I finished was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which was a reread for me. And I did this as a buddy read with Ariel over at Reading and Whatnot. We had sort of first discovered each other's channels, I think, when she commented on my review of Addie LaRue when I read it in January, because I was like, it's good, but it's a 4-star book. And she was like, what's wrong with you? So then we talked about it. And she at that point had read it in print and I had listened to it on audio. And so we decided to switch our modes of reading. So then she listened to it on audio in October and I read it actually in Kindle, but I read the print to see if that influenced what we thought about the book. And it did actually, partly the reread and partly experiencing it in a different medium did increase my rating of the book slightly. So I went from a 4-star to a 4.5-star book, but I still can't quite get to the 5-star level with Addie LaRue. It's a very, very millennial book, if that makes any sense to anyone else. It's a little sort of overwritten with like the lush evocativeness of it as like a fantasy romance sort of thing. There's a lot of repetition in the writing. So, especially towards the end, it felt a little bit like Schwab was sort of relying on repetition of these like strong like phrases and writings and like things that would really draw out your emotion. And she was like sort of repeating that over and over without moving the story forward. If that makes any sense. But anyway, so yeah, I like it. It's really good. I would happily reread it again someday in the future. It's a very easy book to get caught up in. It is absolutely beautiful. I really like sort of the idea, just sort of thinking about, our like memory and our perception of ourselves and how we're perceived by others and how much that matters to our experience of being human. It's a really cool book, but not quite 5 stars for me still. So sorry, Ariel. But anyway, with that, that's everything that I read in the month of October. So pretty good reading month. Now it's November. I've been tracking along pretty hard with some fantasy books because I've been doing a lot of travel. Those are my go-to on airplanes and such. And I'm making good progress with my nonfiction November reads. So stay tuned for all of that, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.